Hey everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Business of Sport show. Today I'm joined with another international level coach, none other than Brian Ashton. How are you, Brian?
I'm great, thanks, and looking forward to the next, however long it is, I'm going to chat with you.
Well, we'll see what we can get out of you.
Right, okay.
So, for people who don't necessarily know you, introduce yourself. Let's talk about your history. What have you done? Where have you been? Yeah,
Right,
who is
right.
Brian Ashton?
Yeah, who is Brian Ashton? It's a good question, that. Yeah, he's a restless guy, I tell you that. That's a good word to describe me. Never satisfied with what he's doing, which has often got him into really good places, and probably more often than that, got him into places that are not quite so good. But no doubt that will unravel as we talk about things. Me born in South Lancashire into a rugby league fraternity. My father played semi-pro rugby league, and his career interrupted by World War II. So I was brought up really on rugby league, introduced to rugby union when I went to secondary school, because the grammar school I went to didn't play league. And so my path sort of continued along the union lines from that time on. But although I continued to play league on Sundays until I was 16, 17 years of age, I think I was very fortunate to have a league background in terms of playing scrum half in union, because it made me slightly different than the normal union nines in the 1960s. Went off to uni, became a teacher. So I started teaching in 1969 in a secondary modern schools that no longer exist, in Preston in Lancashire. So I suppose I've been teaching and coaching because I'm still involved in the game, from a coach education point of view. This is my 54th year. No, it's not. Yes, it is. 54th, coming up to 55th year. So I'm probably one of the old men of international rugby. Played the game as well. I went on tour with England to Australia in 1975, which was the highest level I got to. I didn't play in a test. I was picked to play in the first test, but my first wife lost a baby during the week leading up to it, so I flew back. I was an old man by then, rugby playing wise. I was nearly 30 years of age, and I'd got this off to go and play in France. So my restless nature came to the fore. Went and played in France and went and played in Italy for a while. Came back. My coaching career since then has involved international coaches, as you mentioned. At senior level, first post was I started helping in 1984, went to New Zealand in 85 as assistant coach on the England tour, and finished in 2008. So it spanned a fair number of years on and off. Club level, coached Bath Rugby was the big one, 1988 to 1996. When Bath are very, very successful. That was not down to my coaching necessarily. They just had some bloody good players. But that was fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Then went to Ireland, which is a big mistake. Nothing against the Irish people. It was my fault. Didn't do due diligence and went into an environment that it's just after the game had gone professional, which hadn't gone professional particularly, certainly in Ireland. Still lots of amateur traces to it. And then joined England, Clive Woodward's England in 1998, and stayed with them till 2002 as attack coach, and finished in 2002, largely down to, and again, this is my restless nature getting me into trouble, down to personal and domestic reasons. Ran the England Rugby National Academy, which sadly disbanded when I left it. I think a year after I left it, and then went back to the senior team. 2006, 2008 as head coach. And since then, I've worked for myself in coach education around the world, largely in rugby. And at the moment, I've got a consultancy contract with England Rugby to work alongside coaches in the women's Red Roses senior team and the England under-20s men's team. But I've worked since 2009 for the International Rugby Academy of New Zealand, headed by Murray Mexted, the ex-All Blacks. I used to go out there on a regular basis before COVID. I've been doing it on Zoom since. And that's been amazing, absolutely amazing, to mix with Some of the best coaches in the world, and obviously some of the best players as well. I've also worked for England cricket. I've got a contract still with Premier League football, where I do some consultancy work and coach education work with some of their younger coaches in the professional clubs. And so it's been quite a varied career. I've also kept my hand in education, in terms of helping out various groups, etc.
You certainly keep them busy then, mate.
No, I'm not. It sounds really busy, but I don't work. I probably don't work more than 100. I'd definitely not more than 100 days a year. So it gives me 265 still to get into trouble.
Oh, I'm sure you do. So, let's talk about kind of getting into the kind of coaching side of things then, because obviously, you were coaching Bath, that kind of transition period going from amateur to professional. I mean, what was that kind of change like?
Well, I think it was quite difficult for Bath. Bath had been the top side, as you may know, the top side in the UK. I would imagine.
Wasn't 96 the last time? I mean, some of my Bath supporter friends probably hate me for saying this, but wasn't 96 the last time they actually won the league?
It may well have been, yeah. I was head coach then. We won the double, the league and the cup. Yeah, but they did win the Heineken, the European Cup, it was called, either a year or 2 years later. So that was the last big trophy that they won, I think. I might be wrong on that. But they found it difficult. I think a couple of the players left the club because they got better offers financially elsewhere. I mean, it was a complete financial fight. And I mean, now it's all coming home to roost, with clubs going bust, players' salaries being ridiculously high, given the nature of the support for the game, etc., etc. But so that was a tough time for Bath Rugby, I think. But I'd had a fantastic time being involved with them from 1988 till then. Because one of the things I learned very quickly were there were players at Bath. It was full of international players who were household names at the time. There were players there who knew more about the games in their positions than I did. So it would have been incredibly foolish of me not to tap into their knowledge. And so it became for me a very collaborative approach to coaching.
Yeah.
It was players and coaches in together. And I realised very quickly, something I'd not realised, I should have done, but not particularly before, that players are far more important than coaches because they go out and deliver on the field in the 80 minutes. Coaches don't. Coaches create an environment, help players out if players need help in various ways. But, I mean, the players are the key people in the game. They're the ones that actually deliver. So my coaching philosophy and style sort of over a period of 8 years changed quite dramatically.
Yeah.
And
I mean, do you think that gives players too much power at times?
No, I don't. Not if. I mean, I suppose we're only given the power of decision making and problem solving and solution finding during the minutes 1 to 80. But also, it's also in preparation leading up to the games as well. But it's not. When I think of player power, I think of players sort of running organisations and demanding salaries, high salaries, this, that, and the other. This is all down to how we're going to play the game.
Yeah.
And I think the more opportunities you can give to players to be involved in that, maybe that's the best way of putting it, the better it becomes.
Yeah.
There'll always be players who don't want it. So you always have to find a nucleus of players. I call them the influencers.
Yeah.
A lot of people call them a leadership group. I don't believe in that because I think each player should lead himself. So I call these guys the influencers, and they're the ones who sort of influence the team. If there are players in that group that really don't want to take much responsibility or be accountable.
Yeah. I mean, we'll come back to some of your time at Bath in a minute, but since we're talking about players and players' involvement in kind of in the game, I remember seeing vaguely around the 2007 World Cup because I think you lost the first game to South Africa.
Yeah.
And then I kind of remember players coming out and almost kind of getting that feel that they were almost taking charge.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt certainly from a spectator point of view, that it felt like, player power. Were they throwing your kind of playbook out and just, the likes of Delalio and Borthwick and those guys kind of taking over? Was that a case then, or was it just more of misrepresentation in the media, as a lot of things these days?
I mean, there was no playbook to throw out the window for a start, because I don't coach like that.
Yeah.
I sort of coach on principles of play and let the players and the coaching staff fill in the details. So the playbook, as a lot of people look at rugby, with game plans and playbooks, just didn't exist at all. There was a framework and principles of play. And I think that's one of the things that was, and I'll hold my hand up, if it was confusing for some of the players, then I'll hold my hand up and say I should have have a bit more clarity about what it was that we wanted to do. But what was interesting about that was, since the game had gone professional, the coaches had assumed, I think it probably following the football model, had assumed a greater importance in the game in the eyes of the media and the fans, etc. So here's the man in charge. He's going to tell us how to play. And I remember not a conversation at all. I remember reading one of the national newspapers in that interim period between the game going professional and actually being professional, when I was a head coach at Bath. And I think one of the players was interviewed, and he's asked the question, well, what difference is going professional going to make to you now? And he said, well, I'm just going to have to do what the coach wants me to. And I was horrified, absolutely horrified, because that was completely opposite of how we operated.
Yeah.
But I think that was part and parcel of the early part, if not even now, of professional rugby. I sort of intimated earlier that maybe in some eyes the coach is more important than the players, which is complete nonsense in my opinion. But I think during that 2007 period, it was, some players had come from environments where this is the plan, this is how you play, etc. But I didn't operate like that. But we had a meeting after a very lively and interesting meeting after the South Africa defeat, and we sort of came up with, and if you ask the players now, they will agree with this, and some of the names you mentioned have said that too, that it was a collaborative approach to how we're going to play.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing was, and maybe this is where the misrepresentation by the media came, was on the Monday morning afterwards, I said to the players, right, you present this to the squad, not me, because it'll have far more impact coming from you than it will from me. And it may well be that was mentioned and then misrepresented, etc. But
I can see that.
Ultimately, I actually got what I wanted. I wanted the players to
got to the final,
take ownership, be accountable, show leadership. We beat Australia, we beat France, and we got to the final, and we were bloody close to winning the final as well.
Mark Cueto, was it a try or not?
No, it wasn't. No. He says it was, but it wasn't.
I remember watching it. I was in, I think I was in Prague at the time, and kind of watching it in a bar, and everybody's still going crazy that it was a try, but his foot was just on the line. But it was a cracking adventure, like you said. Lost, was it 36-0 to South Africa, and then to get all the way to the final. I mean, it's slight echoes with the last World Cup, where everybody was writing England off, and to make it to the third place playoff, fair shout to them, and that's coming from a proud Welshman. So
I think maybe the slight difference this time is the fact that we had to play Australia and France to get to the final.
Yeah,
and they were, on paper, they were much higher up the world rankings and better teams than we were. And France had just beaten the All Blacks. France were playing in a home World Cup. No one gave us a chance against France.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you said about kind of no playbook and things like that. I mean, obviously, you were an assistant coach under Clive Woodward, and I kind of always imagine, from what I've seen from the outside looking in, where he was bringing in experts in I've said this in another chat with Eddie Jones, for instance, where said about the vision expert to get their peripheral vision and things like that. I always imagine with Woodward, it would be very structured and kind of that kind of, especially with the kind of imagining how the game's going to go and the visualization and kind of things like that. I mean, how did you and Clive get on
I think
with
we got on
coaching
pretty well at the time. Yeah. If you ever watched him play the game, he was a bit of a free spirit when he played the game. So I think he sort of, when he started coaching, he took that into his coaching as well at club level. He was more of a manager than a coach with England, because he appointed myself as attack coach, Phil Larder defence, Dave Ulrich kicking, Andy Robinson forwards coach. So we were the guys who delivered, but he obviously kept a keen eye and a fatherly control over it, as it were. But he and I think got on really well in terms of trying to push the boundaries of the game on the field. And I think that particular period I was talking about, we ended up, we were very fortunate, and this again is really important and sort of reinforces what I said to you earlier on. We're very fortunate that we had a group of players who were very keen, I felt, to change the perception of how England could play rugby. You know, the perception has always been around the world, and still is, and it probably is the way they play at the moment. They got a big pack, they've got a good defence, and they've got a kicking number 10. Probably pretty well sums up England's 2023 World Cup campaign. But we had players who wanted to change that. You look at some of the guys who played: Dawson, Bracken, halfback, Wilkinson at 10, Greenwood, Cat, Tyndall in the centre, Jason Robinson, Ben Cohen, Ian Balshaw, Austin Healy, etc. These guys were game breakers in many ways, and they didn't want to play the conventional game. They wanted to be different, and you had forwards who could deliver the ball, allow them to play that, and some of the forwards started to buy into that as well. So they became footballing forwards, sort of a la rugby league, as opposed to just scrummagers and guys who won line-outs and hit ropes. So
obviously you left in 2002. Do you wish you had hung on for another year to?
Well, it'd be nice to be. Rugby's never defined my life, so whether I'm a World Cup winner or not, it really doesn't make that much difference to me. It would have been nice, but it didn't happen. There were things going on in my personal and domestic life, which made it very difficult for me to to maintain the real focus that's required, I think, and B, also to be happy in the environment that I was in. So I thought it was best I stepped aside, which is what I did. Whatever's been reported is what I did.
I mean, I've seen it. Obviously, I've spoken to a lot of people, creating these podcasts, and there's always that seemingly disconnect between reality and some of the stuff reported in the media. It feels like there's a lot of clickbait being generated by sound bites of, taken out of context and things like that. And what was your relationship with the media like?
I think on the whole, it was pretty good. I mean, when I started coaching England in the professional era, I've been around for a long time, and I knew a lot of the media through being involved at Bath, almost on a personal level. And I think the media was different in those days, and I suspect that when you started talking about clickbait and this, that, and the other, then you were probably referring to that inadvertently, or maybe advertently. So I mean, I think in those days the relationship with the media was a lot cozier, a lot easier than it probably is now. But I mean, there were times when you sort of looked at them when they asked some questions, and some of the things they wrote about, you think, where the hell have they got that from? Why don't they just try and verify that before they put it into print? But I suppose it may well be that part and parcel of a journalist's job is to create
sensationalism.
Create controversy. More people start reading what they write about, etc. I mean, now that's gone into social media as well. I mean, I actually don't do social media, but just now and again, I actually go onto my wife's social media and have a look at some of the things people comment about some of the games I've watched, and think, Jesus, these guys must be living on another planet.
Yeah, I totally get that. Everybody's got their own kind of opinions and takes on things, and a lot of people have criticized Wayne Barnes after the World Cup final, but then on the flip side, I've seen a lot of people looking in from the outside of rugby, going, you know what, the refereeing was fantastic because he explained to the players everything that was happening, why they were making these decisions, and everything like that, and people. I've seen people calling for that in football, for instance, because of the fact that referee's decision is, well, it's a penalty, it's a free kick, no discussion, no nothing, no explanation or anything. So, yeah, I think people will always have their opinions, rightly or wrongly.
Of course they will. Of course they will. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Wayne Barnes one is an interesting one. I mean, I don't know him particularly well. I've met him a couple of times because he sort of came on the scene after I'd finished.
Yeah.
But I think he's been an outstanding referee. There's no doubt about that. But like every other human being, he makes mistakes. The thing that really annoys me about the modern game in terms of refereeing and stuff like that, it's not so much the refereeing as the TMO stuff.
Yeah.
I'm sick and tired of it. I really am. I think Steve Hansen said somewhere last week that he's just got fed up of it. And I agree with him that the TMO should be there to adjudicate on whether a try has been scored or not, but also available to the referee if the referee thinks there's been foul play here, but I'm not sure is it worthy of a red card or not. And he goes to the TMO, not the TMO intervenes with the referee. He goes to the TMO, can you check that? So the referee is in control of what's going on. He's controlled the TMO as well as the game.
Yeah, I have seen comments recently from Nigel Owens saying about the TMO and the new bunker system as well, saying that actually the guys that are in the bunker aren't necessarily international level referees, and yet they're making decisions on international games. It's certainly something I'm going to be asking. One of my guests shortly is going to be Ben Whitehouse, who was one of the guys in the bunker.
Yeah.
But what's your take on this whole bunker system and things like that then?
I agree entirely with what Nigel Owens has said. I'm not all that sure that we need a bunker system. I think again, I read too that there weren't internationally qualified referees who were making these decisions. You mean seriously at a World Cup final, the guys making decisions not internationally qualified? But even more than that, rugby is it's a very dynamic, it's very quick moving at the top level of the game, it's very emotional, etc. And if you're sat in a bunker 10 miles away from the ground, you just you're not involved in that. The referee's right in the mix there in the middle. He can hear what's going on, he can see what's going on, and I still think 99.9% of the time he's the best person to make a judgment call. And if he feels at 0.1% that he's not, then he legitimately can say to the TMO, look, I've no idea what went on there. Just have a look and let me know. But do we need to stop the game? And does everybody in the stadium need to see it?
Yeah.
Just look at it and come back to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose there was that moment in the final because with the ITV preamble before they were interviewing Aaron Smith, who was obviously saying this is going to be his last game as an All Black. He wanted to go out on top, especially since he had unfortunately lost his father, earlier in the year. So wanted to go out, and there was that moment where he scored that try. Now, I've said it before. My wife isn't a big sports fan, but even she was cheering on New Zealand and Aaron Smith at that time, going, you know what, that's a perfect way. They're coming back into the game. Yeah. He scored a try on his final outing and all the emotion. And then it gets called back to a knock on and, a penalty and so forth, because I can't remember whether it was the touch judge or the TMO kind of called it back. And do you think rugby needs that slight less focus on technology and allow those little moments to be left into the game?
Right. So number one on that, from what I understand, the TMO cannot intervene if it's gone through two more phases. And when Aaron Smith scored, it was fifth phase.
Yeah, it was well
So
over
according
that.
to the laws of the TMO, whatever the rules of TMO judication, he shouldn't have intervened. There's nothing to do with him by that stage. I
Right.
suppose when you look at a World Cup final, if New Zealand had won and that had been the decisive score, and then it had come out that they knocked it on before he scored the try, can you imagine the furore that would have kicked off? Can you imagine?
Uproar.
Can you imagine Erasmus at the end of the game? He would have
There,
gone through the roof.
there would have been an hour-long video on YouTube about that.
Yeah, so there's got to be a balance to that somewhere. And like I said before, they've got to work out a way. I'm okay with TMOs adjudicating. Was it a try? Was it not?
Yeah.
They've got to work out a way. What are we actually adjudicating on? How far back do we go? And in this instance, it was 5 phases. But actually, if you knock it on the line out, that then leads to a try, then it's not a try, is it?
Yeah.
It's not a try. Especially in a World Cup final, it's not a try. If you're playing a game where, like some of the World Cup games for New Zealand beat Italy in '96, whatever it was, then and Italy scored that try, does it make a difference? The answer is no, it doesn't. So that's probably not a very satisfactory answer, but
it's a diplomatic one, Brian.
what I've given in it, not like me at all, being diplomatic.
Well, let's see if we can get you in trouble. What about the kind of whole bunker situation in terms of like head on shoulders, high tackles? Do you think that that's right in terms of keeping the game moving rather than stopping and the referee watching it and replay after replay on the pitch? Or yes, it's a high tackle, yes, it's a yellow card at least, let somebody else kind of really look over the footage and we'll just get on with the game? Do you think that was a good thing, or do you think that's something that probably needs to be looked at as well?
I just don't like the bunker system.
Yeah.
For reasons that we've already mentioned. When July comes out and says these guys are not international qualified referees, I didn't know that. I thought, this is crazy. This is crazy. And they're not in the action, as I said. They're not actually there on the pitch in the action, and that can make a big, big difference. I quite like the rugby league report thing. I don't know if you know about
to review it afterwards. And
they put a player on. The referee thinks there's something not quite right there. I couldn't spot what it was. I don't want to keep dragging the TMO or whatever they got in rugby league in because it slows the game down. So they go, right, you're on report.
Yeah. And then it's reviewed by the commission, citing commission.
So the other thing is on this is, so when Sam Kane got sent off for the yellow card, then bunkered to red card, etc. I can't remember who's the guy tackled. Was it Jesse Creel?
You just kind of stepped in and
never even had a HI, did he?
No, I don't think he did. He never went off.
He just carried on playing. So you're thinking, so the team in a World Cup final loses its captain. We play with 14 men for 65 minutes, or whatever it was, about that, 65 minutes. The guy who was injured, who supposedly
had a hit to the head,
so again, we've got to get that right. If it's that bad, then the guy who's been tackled, off you go. Get HIA. There was one with Khaleesi against, can't remember who it was now. Was it Surveyor, wasn't it? When he busted his nose. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the same game. And Khaleesi went off for a yellow card, but Surveyor stayed on.
Yeah. It's the other side of the coin, isn't it? That if you've deemed it a high tackle, then surely the guy that's been hit should also go off because he's taken a heavy shot to the head.
And obviously they can have a replacement come on, but I mean it's if it's deemed worthy of a yellow or red card, and the other guy just stays on the field, because it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
Yeah.
Some players can go down injured as though they've been hit by a bloody truck.
Yeah.
When actually they've not been hit at all.
Yeah. I remember in the Wales-Argentina game in the quarterfinals, I think Nick Tompkins got hit in the head and there was that uproar of, it should have at least been reviewed or whatever. He got sent off for a HIA, head injury assessment, but nothing else got done. Well, if you've deemed that he's just been hit in the head, then surely there should be some kind of disciplinary action. But again, do you think there's a lot of inconsistencies?
Oh, massively, yeah.
Do you think we'll ever get away with that?
Maybe that's not the TMO's fault. I think it might be just with the laws of the game and the speed of which things happen now. You know, I know from my playing days, if a lot of people tattle me around the shoulders, it slid up to the neck because I'm not very tall. You know, but I never thought, bloody hell, ref, it's just part of the game. Just get up and get on with it.
Head collisions, things like that. Yeah, I mean,
you'll end up making it a non-contact game if you're not careful.
Yeah, but I mean,
just another thing about this TMO. Well, sorry, it just went through my head last November. Is I'd love the game to be played 15v15 for the full time the ball's in play.
What, no subs or?
Oh no. So if whatever they do with the yellow red cards, somebody else comes on to replace them. Right.
They were talking about that at one stage, weren't they? A red card is 20 minutes, but that player can't come back on.
Yeah. I'm looking at it now from an entertainment spectator point of view, not from a rugby playing point of view. If I paid 250 quid for a World Cup final ticket, and after 15 minutes, one team went down to 14 man, I'd be thinking, right, it's game over. And in fact, it wasn't, and New Zealand could have easily won that game.
Definitely.
But, you know, the chances are it's game over that. And I'm thinking, bloody hell, I've travelled all the way, paid all that money. So
and within the first 20 minutes,
a guy gets red card and that's it, game
potentially
over.
Decided.
Yeah. So I think that's something to look at as well. I'm not saying I've got the answers to this because I'm not qualified as a referee or God, I wouldn't want to live in a bunker being a TMO, for God's sake. Yeah. It's bad enough I come down south now and again instead of being up in Lancashire without going in a bunker.
You said 15 on 15. Now, one of the things that you know, our mutual friend, Mr. Moffat, has mentioned, and we've put the video to it in the description for his podcast, is the 11s game. Yeah. And you know, we've kind of alluded to it when we were talking about a little bit about Bath in terms of, you know, going professional and players now being paid, you know, huge sums of money in places. And obviously we've seen what's happened with Wasps and Worcester and London Irish, and who knows what's going to happen this season. We know rugby is heading towards a bit of a pivotal moment. Do you think that, you know, the 11s game that David has kind of mentioned and you know is a big champion of, is something that will help drive more participation, more engagement with fans as well? You know, what's your take on the 11s game?
I think it's a fantastic concept. I think Robbie Deans has actually run some 11s games, and they've looked with players who are not anything remotely like top level players, I think university kids and whatnot. The game looks very open. It looks very dynamic. There's still a contest for possession at scrum, line out, and in the tackle area, which is one of the fundamentals of rugby union. There has to be a contest for possession. That's what differentiates it from rugby league, where there is hardly a contest for possession. So I think, you know, from that point of view, it's great. A couple of people who also watched this said, yeah, but it stops the game for being all shapes and sizes because there's so much space on the field now that some of these big, heavier forwards, you know, they won't be able to have the impact that they have in the 15-a-side game.
Yeah.
And I can understand that as well. You wouldn't expect, usually South Africa wouldn't have a bomb squad playing 11-a-side rugby, I wouldn't think.
No.
So there's obviously that's something that needs to be looked at. But in terms of the development pathways, in terms of producing a better product further down the line, I think the 11-a-side game has some real merit in it. I mean, and it's whilst it's a new concept in terms of playing it on an organised basis, I mean, I would imagine I'm not alone as a ex-school teacher and ex-club coach going down to sessions where you ain't got more than 25 players.
Yeah.
You play 13v12 or something like that. So we've probably been doing that for years anyway, in modified practices.
Yeah.
And I think at the grassroots level of the game, because we want to keep as many participants as possible, it will probably give more players more opportunity to enjoy the game I've watched. I remember watching my son play at school. Played at under 14 level, and for whatever reason, they put him on the wing. I don't know why they did, because he wasn't quick. Put him on the wing. I watched 2 games, and he only touched the ball once.
Mm.
I remember saying to the teacher, and he was at the school that I was at as a pupil. I was saying, "Well, I'm going to ask my lad if he's really interested in playing this game."
Yeah.
I said, "Because he stand on the wing, bloody shivering." So I think to try and avoid things like that, if we're going to want players to play the game, they've got to be actively participants in it. So
Yeah.
we've got to have a game where that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, certainly at grassroots, the last couple of seasons after COVID, um, I was dabbling a little bit in coaching, and probably not successfully. But I remember the directive that came out of the RFU was they came out with something called Game On, which then dropped, said that you could play with 10 aside, half a pitch, 20 minutes each half, because obviously participation after COVID, I think probably like myself, people like waking up on a Sunday morning and feeling like they hadn't been hit by the number 42 bus, and realizing we can actually move our necks and walk around the next day. So, but I didn't see a lot of teams using that. In fact, I know certainly one local team who refused to do that when one of the opposition didn't have enough players and they had an abundance of players. They weren't going to lend them any because you couldn't really, because you had to all be registered, and the second thing is they wanted to put their guys out on the pitch, so they refused. And what happened? Nobody had a game that day.
Yeah.
So I think 11s has certainly huge grassroots opportunities.
Absolutely. As a part of the development pathway. And I think actually part of development pathway in the professional game as well. You look at academies now. Some of the academy players never play rugby.
Yeah.
They're stuck in academies. They never play any rugby. My involvement with England under-20s 2 years ago, first game, there was a guy got picked to play hooker for the under-20s. There were 2 or 3 injuries, so he's about 4 in line.
Yeah.
And he came from a club who never played him at hooker. They played him in the back row for 45 minutes in one senior professional game. And he's suddenly elevated to England under-20s hooker, first choice.
Crazy.
I mean, bloody nonsense, that. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
By using, a game based around the sort of principles that David suggested, and I think it's got a fair bit of traction from people around the world, then that could start to solve those problems. I mean, what does a player want? Does he, I highlighted before, like my son, does a winger want to stand out on the wing?
Yeah.
But 15 aside and not touch the ball or touch it once? Henry Arundel against Argentina.
Yeah.
He never touched the ball. He took him off.
Yeah.
Fastest winger in the world, potentially. Never given him the ball and took him off the field. I mean, you can't believe it.
And you kind of, people are saying he had a bad game. But if he doesn't touch the ball,
how can he have a bad game?
He's kind of not even in the game,
exactly.
Let alone having a bad game. And again, people need opportunities, and people want to play. Like you said, people aren't just turning up on a Saturday so they can stand on the wing, they can move up, they can move down, they can move side to side, following the play and never getting the ball. Yeah. What's the point?
Yeah,
and especially at grassroots level.
I know. We've got to remember too that the majority of players who play rugby play it for fun.
Yeah,
they play it as a diversion from either school lessons if they play at school level, or at club level. The senior players from the working week, etc. And they want to have some fun, And if I was a winger, I'd make very sure I did my due diligence before I went and played for any club. So I'm thinking, I'm not going to go there because I'll never get the ball.
Yeah. Luckily, I was a prop, so always in the middle of.
I'll guess that, yeah. So you've been in the game all the time, but even so, I mean, you say if it's a game for all shapes and sizes, fine, we'll have our scrummage and our life, but it's got to work the other way as well, hasn't it?
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
I think watching the 11s game, it certainly seems to promote more kind of heads up rugby because
yeah,
you have got that gap. You've got to work harder in defence because obviously there's a lot more gaps to it and it's a
yeah.
lot faster. So it's great for better for fitness as well, but also it promotes heads up rugby, which can only be a good thing for the 15 aside game because
We would hope so, yeah, yeah. I think the big problem is that we can talk around this for bloody ages, and is it the general conservatism of rugby in this part of the world?
I've kind of I feel like I repeat myself a few times with this next statement in terms of feeling that World Rugby, or certainly some parties of World Rugby, seem to have their kind of head in the ground and don't quite see the tsunami that's about to hit rugby in general. With participation is already down at grassroots level, which means that there are going to be less players coming through. Rugby might almost become a bit of an elitist kind of sport then, because if it's players coming from private schools into academies into professional teams, there are a number of players that I know that have been absolutely outstanding. They could play at higher levels, but there's never been those opportunities. Do you think that World Rugby are almost oblivious to this issue? They're just focusing on the big spectacles like the World Cup and this new competition that they're throwing into the mix as well.
I wouldn't say they're oblivious to grassroots rugby. I mean, one of my best friends is the chairman of World Rugby, Bill Beaumont, because I played all my rugby with him.
And well, you'll have to invite him onto the podcast.
I don't think he does things like that. And he's well aware of all the issues that we're talking about, etc. Yeah. And he might be the chairman, but he's not the guy who says, "Oh, we're doing this, we're doing that, etc." Other people make those decisions, but he's well aware of it, certainly. And I think, there's obviously a big distinction between the elite game now. Elite, Jesus, that's a great word, isn't it? What's elite about rugby? The top level professional game now, it has drifted slowly over the past few years, hasn't it, to become a real power collision based game.
Yeah.
And I'd quite like to talk a little bit about that if we've got time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, because I think players are getting bigger, and it is just that whole car crash. Everybody wants that big hit. Everybody wants to.
It's become, and we talked about it. So it's become game plan orientated. This is how you play the game. Game plans almost by definition are regimental. They're restrictive. You look around the world at players now, and the likes of Finn Russell, etc., who probably, if he's given a game plan, probably tears it up and throws it in the bin.
Well, you stifle him.
I'm going to go out and play. I'll go out and play rugby because I'm a smart player and I can understand how the game's evolving around me, from the first whistle to the last whistle. So I think, there's that level of the game, but we've got the grassroots level, as you call it. I just call it anything below full professional level. There's got to be a game that players who only train 2 nights a week, kids who maybe at secondary schools maybe only train 1 day a week and play a game every now and again. These are the people that we've got to encourage to keep playing the game.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the likes of Owen Farrell and people like that, that's where they come from. That's where they started. I mean, Owen Farrell started playing with George Ford Junior Rugby League.
Yeah.
Little kid. That's where they come from. Everybody comes from grassroots.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Finn Russell. Now, if memory serves me right, I think he wasn't necessarily in the academy system in Scotland. He was, playing amateur rugby. He was a labourer and then kind of got his chance and got spotted and so forth. Do you think because of the academy structures and again, private schools and things like that again, it's become too regimented? And therefore, the players who are the mavericks, the creatives, the guys that are going up against the old heads who have been there, done it, and are working their way down. that are the grisly ones that will do all the nasty dark arts in the scrums or whatever. Do you think that rugby, I don't like saying it, but the elite side of rugby is kind of missing that because they're overcoached? Do you think sometimes these days?
I think overcoach is very much a great word to use. Yeah, there's so much data analysis now, and some teams play according to what the data suggests they should do, which to me is just total nonsense. But there we are. That is going to be very difficult to change. Now we've gone down that route. I'm just waiting for AI to get involved, artificial intelligence in rugby, and suddenly we'll be playing rugby on a bloody screen like we're doing now. There won't be any players.
It wouldn't surprise me, and especially when I've been at talks with coaches where they've talked about the data and they've talked about his percentages and it's this and that and that. Every player is GPS these days, so therefore they know if they're not quite making the yardage or they're not up to speed or whatever. Is it death by data these days then?
So I always ask the question: why is it that the GPS that players these days? So when I was a little kid, I could go out in the summer holidays, play for 8 hours. I came from a working class background, didn't eat particularly well, etc., etc. But I had the energy to run about for 8 hours a day. You put a GPS thing on my back, and the coach will say, "Right, you've done your stuff today. I've only run about for about 30 minutes."
Yeah, come off.
What's happened in between all that?
Yeah,
it's just crazy. And you just on that, I just put a couple of things down. I hope you don't mind me.
No, go for it.
So let's talk about replacements. Yep. All right. So I go down to 5, but you can only replace a player who's been assessed by an independent doctor as to whether he's fit to continue to play or not.
Yeah.
So if he's fit to continue to play, you play 15 players, play all the way through.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's going back a number of years, but I think certainly we saw it during the World Cup with Razzie's 7-1 split and almost bringing on a completely fresh pack.
But they kept stopping the game though, didn't they? Yeah. And etc. And teams do that. The teams that want to play a slow, forward orientated, and nothing personal against yourself.
I was going to say slow. I was a dynamic prop. Who am I kidding?
I can see that. Yeah. They can manipulate the laws of the game to be able to do that. Yeah. The other thing, and I suppose there's a connection with that, is the ball in play clock. So we get this ball in play top level. It's about 36 minutes, I think. Something. I
was going to say, I remember Warren Gatland kind of saying in an interview once that it's only about 35 to 40 minutes that the ball is actually in play.
But actually it's not in play for that, because that includes if you kick it up, if you have a penalty, kick it off the field, the clock keeps ticking.
Yeah.
So the ball might be in the stand. That still counts as ball in play. Yeah. But the reset scrums, now and again the referee will say stop the clock, but some referees don't.
Yeah.
That counts. Resetting scrums counts as ball in play. I would, right, this is pretty radical. I would reduce the length of games from 80 to 60 minutes.
Yeah.
But introduce the laws where the ball is in play for 60. So when it's kicked off the field, the clock stops.
So it's still potentially an 80-minute game, but actually in play time is 60 minutes.
So the ball, when it's line out, the ball is not back in play until the ball has left the hooker's hand.
Yeah.
So the clock starts again. At scrum, the ball is not in play until 9's put it in.
Yeah.
So that would so let's play. We can play 60 minutes rugby, 30 minutes each half, where the ball is in play all the time. That's twice the amount, or getting close to twice the amount that it is now in an 80-minute game.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, going back to your first point there about reducing the subs then to 5, I mean, if they're having to play, almost an extra third of time with the ball in play, then you could argue, well, actually, you might need more subs. But then again, by reducing the number of subs and making sure that the ball's in play for more, you're ensuring that the players are fitter, because otherwise they almost feel rugby almost feels that it's kind of going a bit more towards American football as well. Again with the regimented,
Yeah,
set plays and
yeah,
so forth, and then the replacements. I remember going back, a good number of years ago that Adam Jones, for instance, used to be a last 20 minutes of a game, or the first 20 minutes of a game kind of
yeah,
player.
yeah.
They'd use him, take him off, or put him on, and that was it. Yeah, I think if players are expected to play longer, then they won't be as huge, which means that the collisions aren't going to be as big, which then means that we may not see as many injuries and so forth. So, I'm not against it. I think something has to happen to rugby in order for us to kind of keep it moving forward, because otherwise I think it's going to slip backwards and we're not going to get people playing the game.
Well, yeah, that's the sort of discussion we've been having in the last 20 minutes or so.
Mm.
What do we do to make sure that at the bottom end of the game, the grassroots, call it that, clubs, call it schoolboy rugby, call it development pathway in clubs, like Sunday morning mini rugby, junior rugby, whatever you want to call it. Call it also clubs that play below maybe the championship
Yeah.
in England. So National League One, National League Two, although some of them get paid per game and things like that. But
Yeah.
by and large, they play for fun.
Mm.
I know players. I coached at Fylde Rugby Club, or helped to coach for 3 years when I went back to live up north. We had the best attacking back three in the country. Fullback was Jason Robinson. There was a
Yeah.
lad called Nick Royal, who was an England Sevens player, playing on one wing. Another one, Ollie Brennan, on the other wing, who played for England Counties. And they were as good a counter-attacking back three as any club in the country. And it was a joy to be with them and play with. But the other two lads, Royal and Brennan, had no interest in playing professional rugby.
Yeah.
Because they got good careers.
Mm.
And who came across other players in the same league who were outstanding rugby players. But no, just play for fun. Love it.
Yeah.
Train two
Well,
nights a week. Have a sat a few beers with my mates. Yeah, great.
and that's rugby at its core, isn't it?
Yeah,
It is. You get together, you pass the ball around, you do a bit of training during the week, but then you go and do battle on a Saturday, and win or lose, you have a bit of banter, you're there with your mates, and you have a few beers afterwards, and then you rinse and repeat.
I'm not suggesting that the top level of rugby should be anything remotely like that. But what we are saying, I think, is the fact that if you take that away from the game, if you take that fun element out of the game, then you're going to get less and less players playing it. So there's going to be less and less players coming through at the top end of the game that are good enough to play at that top end.
Yeah, again, don't get me wrong, I'm not against academies or anything. I might come across like that, but I think with guys coming through academies now, I think that social elements and kind of those kind of elements from the amateur days, or even the kind of grassroots days, are kind of taken out of it, because again, they're overcoached. They've got a defined pathway and so forth, and if you do this, you'll get to there. Yeah, I think almost the personalities are somewhat missing as well at times.
Yeah. So I'm just writing something down. So I mentioned, I think in 2002, 2003, England Rugby decided they wanted a national academy.
Yeah.
The best players from all the academies between the ages 16 and 19 came together on a relatively regular basis to try and help a pathway to develop towards a senior team.
Yeah.
They asked me to run it. And so there was me and a blank sheet of paper. And that was it. So when I said to the RFU, what's the purpose of this academy? They said it's to win World Cups in the future. I said, you can't say that. I said, because if a key player gets injured, the referee's decision, etc. So you can't make it that defined. I said, well, let's go down the route of we want to change the way players think about and play the game of rugby. Let's make that as a purpose of the academy. So it's a game-changing environment. And very reluctantly, like some of them agreed, others didn't, whatnot. But I thought, well, I'm not bothered whether they do or not. because that's what I want.
Yeah.
You know, and I think when you ask people at club academy, what's the purpose of your academy? I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going across all sports now, not just rugby.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised to say produce players to play in our first team.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking. So you think of the football world as an example. You think, so the first team play like this. The average life of a first team manager is 18 months. So we produce a group of 16-year-olds to play like that. By the time they get to 18, the manager's changed and he says, we want players to play like this. You think, shit, that's 2 years work wasted. Academies should be there to produce the best people and the best players they can in every single way. So technically, physically, game intelligence-wise, mentally robust and agile. It's not about producing players to play for their first team. It's about producing players who ultimately are going to have a big impact on the game and take it to another level. And whether they do it with that club or another club, for me, ultimately, it's irrelevant. I'm a servant leader at academy level. I'm serving the needs of the players. I'm not serving.
Because you're creating somebody with the skills and the talents that should hopefully be able to adapt to situations,
Like.
because you're giving them the skills and that kind of toolkit that they need to go, here I am. I recently watched the Beckham documentary and looking at when he went to Real Madrid, and then he had to play further back than normal because Luis Figo was there.
Yeah.
And it was just an absolute disaster. Couldn't adapt, couldn't do anything, and you know, and this is supposedly one of the best players in the world, but couldn't adapt and change and I think so. I think you know, absolutely right. I mean, what are your thoughts then with the National Academy obviously no longer being there?
Yeah.
Do you think that's a missed trick?
Yeah. I mean, some of the clubs are for it, some of the clubs are against it. They thought their players would be asked to play in a way that wasn't suited to the way they wanted them to play. Others thought it was a great idea.
Yeah.
So it's a real mixed reaction. But just going back to what we talked about Beckham and Luis Figo, etc., and just rugby examples. So Austin Healey came from the amateur game, played professional rugby, played on the wing for England, played at 9 and 10 for Leicester Tigers. More often he played on the wing. You know, these are guys he's a rugby player. He wasn't a winger. He wasn't a scrum half. He wasn't a flyer. He was a rugby player.
Yeah.
Mike Catt at Bath, 10, 12, 15.
Yeah.
He was a rugby player. You know, and these players just seem to be disappeared from the game now. Rugby players, you are now, this is your position. These are your positional requirements. These are the GPS stats you've got to get for your position, etc. Think, whoa, hang on a minute. And so I remember talking with Stuart Lancaster a few years ago, and I asked him the question. I think he was at Leinster at that stage. It was Leinster, and I said, Stuart, where have all the rugby coaches gone? And we were doing a Zoom like this because he was over in. What are you talking about? I said, well, we've got head coaches, we've got attack coaches, we've got defence coaches, we've got kicking coaches, we've got line-out coaches, scrum coaches, breakdown coaches, strength and conditioning coach. I said, where are the rugby coaches?
Yeah.
The person who understands how everything fits together. The person who allows and works alongside the players to fit everything together, who understands the game of rugby. You know, we complain about players not having game understanding. But how many scrum coaches, how many line-out coaches have game understanding?
Yeah. It's coaching those micro elements.
Coaching in silos, isn't it?
Yeah.
And at the end of the week, the coach says, right, lads, put all that together and go out and play. I can imagine some players think, well, do we do that then?
Yeah, and I mean, that is kind of filtered down slightly to grassroots level. I mean, the team that I was trying to coach a season or so ago, you know, one of the guys in particular wanted us to have, because I just went, well, we'll have a forwards coach and a back coach, you know, and maybe somebody to help out with a bit of fitness. And it's simple as that, because then you take the backs, I'll take the forwards, we'll bring it all together. Happy days.
Yeah.
And one of the guys said, "Well, I think we need somebody, as a scrum coach and somebody as a line-out coach, and
How old are the lads?
The men's rugby." So
Right,
kind of literally, kind of only one or two leagues above the kind of bottom in Somerset, but saying that wanted an attack and a defence and a fitness coach and strength and conditioning and this and that, and you kind of go, we can just about field a 15-man team on the weekend, and yet you want us to have almost a 15-man coaching staff. It's crazy, and like you said, it's then going to the lads of going, what, go and put all that together on a Saturday, and yeah, there's no cohesion there. There's no nothing, and again, overcoached.
But and something we sort of talked about at some length earlier on in our chat was the more coaches I have, the more responsibility and ownership and leadership they're taking away from the players.
Yeah, well, they become robots.
Yeah, the players get out on the field and what they're doing is playing someone else's game.
Yeah,
I always think, one of the things I always feel quite proud. I'm not one for blowing my own trumpet at all, because, like I say, I'm compared to players, I'm not important in the game. But I do remember one of the Bath players who's a British Lion turning around to me, said, "One of the things, Brian, do enjoy being involved with you is that we think we take our own game out onto the field as players. You give us that opportunity. We're not following your game."
Yeah.
And, and again, I think that's just a different slant on modern day coaching, that with all the stuff, data stats, percentages, GPS, this, that, and the other, that the players will go run out on the pitch and the game's already decided for them. I mean, England have been, over the past 2 or 3 seasons, have been notorious for their inability to change the way they play when things are not working.
Yeah, and even Wales, say, against Argentina, for instance, it kind of felt there was no kind of plan B. There was no, or not even a plan B, but no kind of, right.
Yeah.
Whatever we're doing at the moment isn't working. We need to adapt, otherwise we're going to lose. And it's like coming up against South Africa and knowing that they're going to play a really forward-orientated game. They're going to basically trying to bludgeon you to death and then pass it out. There's no kind of heads-up rugby. That's where people like Finn Russell and I really hope with Finn at Bath now, they've got a great squad there.
Yeah.
And if they can take the blinkers off and take the kind of restraints off and let him be that general,
let him run the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Out on the field in the middle of it all.
Well, you saw that with him at Racing, where you see the clips where he's just the defense is solid, and then all of a sudden he's just managed to find the key to it. He's put the little dink of a kick through. Somebody else has gone because they've unlocked that defense. They know that they can't go around them. They can't go through them. They've got to find a way of getting past them.
Yeah.
And he's unlocked it. So, hopefully, he's only, was it, a couple of games in at the moment. Hopefully, they can just unleash him. And because, again, they've got great set of backs there.
Take the shackles off. Let them play.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a great, you talk about plan A before. I've just been writing it down when you were talking about, if plan A doesn't work, don't panic, stay calm. There's 25 other letters in the alphabet.
Pretty much, yeah.
I have no idea who wrote that, but I remember reading it. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
How many different ways there are of playing the game, and the people who have in the best position to understand what needs to be done are the guys out in the middle of it all.
Yeah, because they're the ones doing it.
A bit like the referee in the bunker thing, isn't it? As a coach, I'm effectively in the stand. I'm sat in the bunker.
Yeah.
The players are out on the field.
I'm just watching a video.
And design your sessions and your approach to enable that during the week to happen on a Saturday.
Yeah. Well, many years ago, when I hurt my knee and didn't know whether I'd be able to play again, I took the drastic action of taking the referee's exam, and I did the referee's course, and only the foundation one. But I remember being sat there taking the exam, and they were like, "Oh, don't worry, you can have your law book next to you. So if you're not sure about something, look it up." And everybody else in the room had their law book. I put mine in my bag because I thought, if I'm going to be a referee, I'm not going to have to go, hang on, guys, can we just stop play? All right, page 120, 16.5, whatever. It takes, you've got to deal with the situation there. And I think if you overcoach the players, it becomes very American football. You'll get somebody going, all right, blue 32.
Yeah.
And then they'll have to kind of remember, hang on, do I run left or do you run left? Or it becomes very robotic.
Do you think that doesn't happen at the top level of the game now?
Oh, no, I can imagine it does. It's
it really calls for everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember a coach came to my local club, Bridgewater and Albion, and he gave us playbooks. I'd never seen it before, but he gave us this 4 or 5 page playbook where it had everything in it. What every move that we're going to do, kind of what the calls are, and I mean, yeah, it's probably a lot thicker than that, but those are probably the only pages I actually read. And you're thinking, hang on, this is right amateur level,
yeah.
And you're asking us to go through playbooks.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think in terms of you need a framework in which you want to play, but the framework is based on principles of play, like play the game in a dynamic way with lots of movement, be really good at space management and things like that, etc., etc. But then you also need, obviously, you need some sort of line-out calls, scrimmaging calls, backs plays, team plays if you want them. Somebody just wandering along the veranda with some stuff.
No worries.
Oh, it's beer.
Oh, well, there you go. Happy days.
Thank you very much. Yeah, he's gone now. I thought, what we're talking about? Oh, the players and this and that. So, and I think certainly when things start really falling apart on the field, then you need something to fall back on.
Yeah.
So, right, for the next 5 minutes, this is what we're going to do. Let's get us all back together again. Then off we go again. It's almost like restarting the engine, restarting the game, etc. So I get that. But what I don't get in a game that's played most top class pitches, we're assuming a 10-meter in goal area. I mean, you will know this probably is 8,400 square meters of space. At any given time, only 31 of those are occupied by 30 players and a referee.
Yeah.
So it's 8,369 square meter space empty. And people turn around to me and say, there's no space in the modern game. And when I quote that,
there is if you look for it.
So and I know it changes very, very quickly, etc., etc. But you can base a game, and I think there are a couple of sides in the world at the top level who do that. I know for a fact that New Zealand do base game around management of space.
Yeah, well, you saw that in the final of
run, pass, kick, and drive mauls. Pick and go. It's all about management of space. If it's a chattel area and nobody stays in behind it, you pick and go because that's where the space is. It's not about playing out on the wings all the time. And I think there's this illusion when you talk about playing this dynamic space orientated game. Right, we've got to throw the ball all over the field all the time. That's rubbish. That you just play where the space is.
Yeah, well, we kind of said it earlier about collisions and things like that. My kind of thoughts on it is, well, you don't run at the guy. You run at the space next to him. And it's as simple as that. Because if you run at somebody, well, there's somebody in your way to block you. If you run into the space, you got every opportunity of making the extra meters and again making the defense work. But if you're aiming for the collision, well, don't be afraid when there's somebody there blocking you. It's not rocket science. Brian,
we accept collisions will happen in a game. It's a full-on contact game. So you've got to be able to manage that. You've got to be able to win that. And you've got to be able to produce 2-second rucks or whatever they are these days, etc. to do that. Yeah. But I think the first principle is not collision. The first principle's got to be, how can we get in behind them? How can we make them move and think at the same time? Because for Christ's sake, we talk about rugby players here.
Yep.
To ask them to do two things at once, it's a bit of rocket science for some of them. So, let's play a game that is really challenging.
Yeah.
Because the more I find, maybe it's a background, I'm a working class lad, and the more challenging the environment, the more fun you have in it.
Yeah, of course. Let loose. Look, Brian, it's been brilliant to talk to you today, and we will definitely get you back for another episode. We might even get you back with somebody else as well, and we'll have a bit of a panel discussion as well, because you've got such an insight into the game and such an eye-opening view as well. It's been fantastic to have you. So yeah, we'll definitely have you back on. But is there anything, any final word that you want to have on either what you're doing at the moment with the consultancy, or words of advice that you give to people?
Well, I remember reading not that long ago, I think it was a documentary on TV on Dan Carter, because he nearly missed the 2015 World Cup because of injury.
Yeah.
And he spent a year almost training on his own at Southwood, which is a club he came from. And he was doing an interview there, and he said, it's fantastic to be able to come back here and train on my own. Largely, he said, the amateur club that I played with. And they said, well, how does that fit in with? He said, well, it fits in really well with my ethos of international rugby. He said, international rugby is serious fun. There's a seriousness about it, especially when you pull on an All Blacks jersey, because the expectations are incredibly high. He said, but if you're not having fun, you never get the best out of yourself. You take the fun out of the game, and why are you doing it?
Absolutely.
Why are you doing it? That's life, really, isn't it?
Well, it all comes to your why at the end of the day. Of
Absolutely, yeah.
Why are you doing anything?
Why am I here?
Brian, powerful finish, my friend. Powerful finish. So thank you so much for joining us.
Great to meet you, and look forward to seeing you again sometime.
Definitely. Thanks for watching this episode. Make sure you do like, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for future guests.